for the city, so I spend most of my time actually working on the budget. I'm also in charge of labor negotiations, and I also provide recommendations on major policy issues such as homelessness. I'm also an Angelino. I live literally in walking distance of Skid Row in downtown Los Angeles, and I spend a lot of time in this community. My fiance lives in the community of Del Rey. You can see me every Saturday morning at the Blue Bottle getting an Americano and buying a burrito from the food truck there. What we're doing is, for the first time, trying to tackle the issue of homelessness in a comprehensive way. And the reality is that this issue didn't just surface yesterday. It's been going on for decades, and both the city and the county, as you've heard before, often pointed at each other when asked the question, who's in charge of this issue? And for the first time, since I've been working on this issue for almost 20 years, we're actually working in a coordinated way. The strategies that Councilman Bonin talked about are comprehensive. They're intended to deal with the immediate crisis out in the street, as well as permanent supportive housing, which study after study has shown is the best solution to address chronic homelessness. Specifically on identifying places for permanent supportive housing, the council and the mayor instructed my office to identify city-owned property throughout the city of Los Angeles that we own, and to try to find or identify these properties for potential sites for permanent supportive housing or potential sites to sell where those proceeds would go to build permanent supportive housing. Our first attempt at that was to identify 12 properties throughout the city. Some in the northeast Los Angeles, some in south Los Angeles, some on the west side. They're throughout the city. And it's the first effort to do so. We're also identifying additional properties. Let me start by saying there has not been a decision made about which properties we're going to sell, which properties are going to be converted to housing, or what kind of housing or development is going to go into those sites. So if you've been told that that decision has been made, that is simply not true. We're going through that process now, and I know because my office is managing it. So the way we decided to do this was take sort of a broad approach and really ask those people who actually build housing for a living on what is the best approach to do this. So the way the city does that in a formal procurement process is we issue what we call an RFQ, where we ask developers, you tell us, based on these 12 properties, how would you approach this issue? Our goal is to build permanent supportive housing for our homeless population. And for those of you who may not know what that is, permanent supportive housing is where we work and convince a homeless individual who usually has a combination of mental illness, drug addiction, and another physical ailment, who's been outside, living outside, not just for 1 year, but for many years. We work with them at the pace that they're ready, in a very compassionate but persistent way, and convince them to go into housing. And once they're in housing, at the pace that they're ready to receive, we provide them services. Those services are mental health services, addiction services, services to deal with their physical body. And over time, the model has shown consistently, not just in Los Angeles, but throughout the country, that when you approach homelessness in that way, not only do you convince someone to move in, and for many people who have been homeless for a long time, some of you may know people or have seen people in this community who've been homeless for a long time. Once you manage homelessness through this way, not only are they willing to move in, but most importantly, they're likely to stay in. And for some of them, this will be a beginning of a new life, as we just heard earlier tonight. And the goal is to, over a period of 10 years, to make available over 10,000 units of permanent supportive housing throughout the city. Not one single community is expected to share 100% of that burden. And so it's not something that we just made up. It's something that comes from many years of trying and failing on what we see today. I could also tell you, as the Chief Financial Officer of the city, why this is important. A year ago, my office did a study and asked the question, how much are we spending today to simply manage homelessness in the city of Los Angeles? Not to solve it, but simply to manage it. And we're spending well over $100 million a year of your taxpayer dollars to basically move people around from one community to the other. That is just the service, the efforts that are managed by the city. That doesn't count the impact it has on the county. Because when we arrest somebody, there are actually costs associated to arresting somebody, and then we transfer those costs over to the county, who has to house that person in a jail. We transfer those costs to a court system. And when that person gets released and they end up needing care, they get moved back to the county to the emergency room where they're treated. And then only to be where their health care is maintained, and oftentimes ending back in the streets. So what we've created is a system where we basically move people around from one system to the other. And we've collectively understood that we could continue doing that. For the city alone, over $100 million. For the county, it's well over $1 billion. How much is being spent to manage a problem, not to solve a problem. Or we could actually be honest about what it's going to take to actually address it for the long term. And so these properties are one step in that direction. And so that step includes selecting, identifying potential partners, and central to this process is working closely to the community. Because each community is going to demand different things. Some communities may want to ensure that the properties have a certain feel and sense, so that when you walk by them, they look like every other housing that exists already there. And each community defines that differently. Some of them may want retail or some kind of other amenity on the first floor and housing upstairs. Other communities may want mixed housing that includes a combination of both affordable, permanent supportive housing, and even market rate. These are not unusual concepts. They exist in the city, they exist around the country. And so we're going to identify a list of potential partners. Once we've identified those in this community, their responsibility, working with us, working with the council office, the mayor, is to listen to you as to what it is that you want in this community. And through this process, and only after this process, will a decision be made as to how to proceed. But it starts with first asking who's interested in engaging in this. Those proposals are due on the 15th of this month. We will first find out, and it's our goal to have identified who those partners would be and have them presented to the council by the end of this calendar year, so they could begin that process as I mentioned earlier. Thank you.
Thank you.